about to hear a revolution in talk radio, Liberty Talk Radio, where the critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe.
Welcome, everyone, to Liberty Talk Radio, America's libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. Folks, it's time for us to take back control of our government before this bureaucratic, oversized, and self-serving federal government starves us of our property, our freedom, our rights, and our liberty. But to do this, we must shed conventional thinking regarding our political structure. We need to be revolutionaries in thought, dissidents in action. Only after we recognize what our government is doing to our freedom and our Constitution will we start taking it back. And this program is just about that. Folks, well, this is the first broadcast of Liberty Talk Radio since September 30th, 2017. I'm sorry I have been absent. Unfortunately, I had to go for a knee operation, which resulted in some complications. I was just out of it for several months. I think I'm okay now. I may even live through this broadcast. And so I intend to have hopefully 2 broadcasts every week, maybe more, maybe less, but we'll try for 2 to start until we get everything going. We had to move our studio, so right now we're broadcasting actually from my home here in Tulsa, and we have new equipment, and we'll see how everything works out. This is our maiden voyage, and I'm just delighted to be back. Well, today I want to talk about our school system. Now, here in Oklahoma, a few weeks ago, we had a school strike, which I think is kind of peculiar because the teachers are always talking about how much they care for the kids and how much they do everything. And they do. They really do. I know many teachers, and they do care for the kids, and they do put a lot of their own time in, and they're very helpful. But it seems inconsistent. I care for the kids, but, I'm going to go on strike for a couple of weeks. But I don't want to talk about that now. I want to talk about the very concept of schools, of teachers belonging to unions, of this union strike, not here in Oklahoma. This applies to all of the school districts throughout the United States. What's really interesting is that when America has a problem, whether it be, international affairs, whatever the problem is that we always talk about the surface problem. For example, when we talk about the Middle East, we talk about the last shell bombing and why we must send more troops over there and why we must spend billions of dollars more in the Middle East. We never get back to the root problem. We never think critically. And if there's anything that what bothers me about the United States is that we have lost the ability to think. All we do is parrot what we hear on television. Trump will make America great again is an answer that I get, for a lot of questions that when I get in conversations at meetings, don't worry about it. Trump will make America great again because it's our out. We don't have to think, because I think thinking hurts the brain. I think people get strained, or maybe their brains are so clogged up with rust that thinking is just too painful for them. But I'd like to apply that non-critical thinking to the school situation that we have. What baffles me right up front is that where in the Constitution does it state that the federal government is in charge of our schools? Now they say, well, they're not. The states are. They elect the superintendents. Whatever. No, we have a Department of Education. Now, where is that in the Constitution that we have a Department of Education? Now, billions every year are spent just in the bureaucracy of our school system. And of course, the school, the books themselves and what is taught is all regulated by the federal government. And this sounds like George Orwell, 1984, all over again. But we don't think that way because we have become a nation where we're just very obedient. The government says something, we obey, we do it, whether it's constitutional or not. Let's talk about the teacher situation overall. First, I'm going to talk about the teaching situation from a micro point of view. Micro meaning I'm going to talk about Oklahoma. Oklahoma right now has around 43,000 teachers. That's a round figure. Right? Now, that's a heck of a lot of teachers. Now, some of those teachers have been around for 20, 30 years, and some just came on a year ago. Now, just think, if you're a teacher and you signed up to be a teacher a year ago, right, and you agreed to a salary, and I think they had $40-something thousand a year, which is relatively low. I think it's one of the lowest in the country. Not the lowest. I think Mississippi is lower than us, but we're like 40-something, in the ranking of school teacher salaries. But when you signed up, you knew what you were going to get paid. You were going to get, $41,000 a year, whatever it is, plus the regular benefits. And so what bothers me is that same teacher who signed up just a year ago and said, yeah, I'll teach for $40,000 a year, is now on strike for more money. Why doesn't that person say, hey, wait a minute, I agreed to that salary just a year ago. Now I'm asking for a substantial raise. I can see if a teacher been teaching for 10 years and hasn't gotten a raise, or 5 years, they have a beef and they should bring it forward. But you have, en masse, all of the teachers hitting the streets, And what bothers me is that I have teachers that are relatives that are teachers. And they really are caring people, and they're wonderful people. But they don't think. They have inability to really think critically, and it bothers me. I never discuss the school system with teachers because they usually cry, get angry, or walk away. Even if I ask them a plain vanilla question, they can't handle it. So let's get to the core. Why do people become teachers? Anyone think of that? Why do people become teachers? Well, if you think about it, what does a student do? What does a young person do most of their lives until the age of 16 or 18 years old? They sit in the classroom. What do they really know for all those years? What profession are they most closely aligned to? Teachers. That's all they say every day, except for the summertime and the three-month break. They go into the classroom. So I see that when our school system does not prepare our young children for jobs outside the school system, because they teach the same thing all the time in the same program year after year, they get a little bit more advanced as they get older, and that's about it. When you think about it, the only job that most students are familiar with is teaching. So when they graduate, people say, what do you want to do? I want to teach. Well, it's a natural outgrowth because that's the only thing you know. And see, that's a condemnation of our school system. Our school system should encourage people to think and get involved in various activities, various types of jobs, depending on their skill set, their intellectual set, and whatever. But they really do a very poor job of that. They just teach the same stuff year after year, maybe a little bit more advanced. Now, some kids who are just have parents at home that encourage them to read, to think, and they think outside the box and outside of what they learn in school, they start thinking for themselves. So I don't want to be a teacher. I want to be a doctor. I want to be an engineer. I want to be a software programmer, and whatever. Those are the kids that usually fare pretty well in our society. There's an old saying, if you don't know what to do, teach. Those who don't have a skill to do anything, teach. And it's because, not that they're stupid, is that's all they've known. They've sat in the classroom, for 12 years or 13 years. When they graduate, what are they going to do? They'll go to college and get a degree in what? Well, the only thing they know is teaching. So you have a lot of people becoming teachers out of default. And that's a problem with our school system. Our school system are not encouraging them to think based on what their abilities are and their true interests are. Because most of them don't have an interest. So what they do is they go from sitting down in the classroom to standing up in front of the classroom. There's really no change. And in fact, it may even be the same classroom that they've been in themselves. So you don't have a real heavy thought process in this whole situation. And I just wish that we taught critical thinking and let the students really learn how to think critically. And I see this all the time when I go to meetings with people who are older. So many times I get responses that sound as if people are just mouthing off. They just said the last thing they heard on television or on the news. There's not much thought about what is done. I've had conversations with teachers. One time, probably the worst situation I had was I was on a ski trip one time and we were locked in this big room because our rooms were not ready yet. And this was in Red River, New Mexico. And we were sitting in this room and I was sitting next to a teacher. She said, "Oh, I'm a retired teacher." I said, "Oh, you're a retired teacher." I said, I just read a book, and I told about this book called, now I can't think of the name of it. Anyway, it was about World War II. And I said, I read this book about World War II. It was a documentary, and it was written with all the documents, government documents to support whatever said, And, it was Age of Defeat, Age of Deceit. And I mentioned a particular incident that occurred, regarding Pearl Harbor. And this woman was just retired teaching. She was an older woman. And she got so angry that I asked the question about World War II. I figured maybe she knew about it, And she actually screamed at me and left the room. And I tell you, I felt really lousy. I was sitting there. I didn't know what to say or what to do. And I just sat there and people looking at me like I did something horrible. And all I did was ask her a question. Well, basically what happened there is that, she was taught in school, this is what happened in Pearl Harbor. This is what you memorize. You pass the test. You go and you teach the same thing. Now someone was, and I was challenging that, not her. I said, I read this in the book, and I said, this is documented, whatever. And this is what actually apparently happened that we don't hear on television or probably teach in our schools. And I said, I wanted your take on it since you've studied that and you've taught it. And she got really angry. Well, that's my point. My point is that I'm not sure what we're teaching in school is really what really happened, especially in history. I'm not sure what we're teaching in school is relevant, for the students so they can find a job. Look how many students go to college today and get a degree in sociology and the humanities and things like that. And they're living in their mother's basement because they can't find a job. The unemployment rate for college students is at an all-time high. Right? Well, let's back up a little bit. What's the core problem? Well, the core problem is not the school system. It's not the wages. It's not the intellect of the teachers or anything like that. The problem is that the government should not be responsible for teaching our children. The government is not responsible for our children. They say, well, who's responsible for teaching our children? The parents. Parents are responsible for their children. When people tell me how important a college education is, I say, half the billionaires, that's what it be, billionaires in this world, don't have a college education. How did that happen? And we're talking about the richest people in the world, don't have a college education, more than half of them. Richard Dawson, the fellow who put that space satellite up there, plane, I forgot his name, Dawson. Anyway, he was once classified as the fourth richest man in the world. And I heard him give a speech when I was at a business meeting once. And they asked him what college he went to. He said, I didn't go to college. He says, I didn't even go to high school. He says, because I'm dyslexic. And here a guy who's ranked the fourth wealthiest man in the world. Now, that doesn't mean if you don't go to school, you get wealthy. Don't get me wrong, don't go there. I'm just saying that it's not necessary. It depends on the people themselves. And so much of what children do, they learn from their parents. But today, our society seems to assume that, well, you have kids, and the first thing you do with children is you give them to somebody else to mature. You give them to someone else to learn. And the parents don't seem to be part of that equation anymore. The kids sort of just live at home, and then at a certain age they move out. There's not that connection. All the kids that I know that are really smart, I mean, just, not that they have a high education, but they're really smart, come from very close-knit families. They learn from their fathers, their grandfathers, their mothers, their grandmothers, and whatever. And they learn values. And they don't take anything for granted. They don't give you stupid answers, like you hear on television. And I wish we went back to that. You see, we should abolish the Department of Education, because the government should not be responsible for educating our children. And you don't need to go to school in order to get a good job, or to have incentives to do something, or to even be a smart person. Today, on the internet, you got libraries, books all over the place. My wife and I had coffee at the Barnes & Nobles here locally in Tulsa. And I walked around. There are thousands of books, thousands upon thousands of books, Why do you have to go to school? You can pick up any one of those books that interest you on any subject in the world. And you don't have to go to Barnes & Nobles. You can go to a library and do that. You don't have to go to a library. You can get it online. Sometimes they're free, and sometimes just an online edition cost you a couple of dollars. And if you read those books, you could become a valuable person. You don't have to answer just for answering. And when they interview the teachers that were on strike, all they said is, well, we should get more money because, Texas pays more money and all this. They don't talk about the root problem. The root problem is that the schools should be free enterprise. If you teach in one school and this school teaches garbage, you don't send your kids there. But you can send them to another school, or send them to no school at all. Homeschool them. And if you decide to homeschool them, you shouldn't need the permission, a license from the government in order to homeschool your children. First of all, the government is failing beautifully. They're actually failing fantastically with teaching kids in school, teaching kids in government schools. But if you want to teach your kids at home, you have to be sort of get licensed from the government. Well, I'll bet dollars to donuts that any kid that learns at home will outsmart any kid that's gone to any school. Whether or not that home has been licensed by the government or they got permission from the government should have no say in that whatsoever. If the parent doesn't want to teach the kids, they say stay home and watch Looney Tunes all day, that's the parent's responsibility. That's what they should do. But kids are smart. Kids want to learn. They're curious. Now, of course, with today, with the environment, the economic environment, you have people going to school, the children going to school, the mothers and fathers going to work, kids coming home to empty houses and all that. The society is broken up, so this is going to be very, very difficult. Back in the old days, I used to look at these cowboy movies, and they had a picture of a town, and then at the edge of town there was a schoolhouse. And I never understood how they could have one woman teaching classes for a few hours a day, and in the class were all types of excuse me, I was just checking the computer to see if there's anything on the line. They were kids of all ages in the class. There'd be a 6-year-old kid and another 15-year-old kid that was maybe 6 feet tall, and they went there to learn the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic type thing. But I never understood that. I said, well, how come they don't have it broken up by age? Well, because the school was only meant to teach them to read, basics of reading, the basics of writing, and the basics of arithmetic. The families, and it wasn't government run, the town brought the school teacher in, and then the town paid her, and usually was a woman. Then when they went home at the end of the day, they brought their guns, because they usually went hunting afterwards, and then after that they went home. And some of them learned skills from their parents, who were either farmers, welders, horseshoe makers, whatever they did at home, they learned from their parents. And from there, if their factory opened up, they got a job there based on the skills that they've learned at home. They didn't need anything more than reading, writing, arithmetic, and they had a skill. Now you say, well, that's kind of archaic. It is compared to today. Of course, they don't have computer schools and stuff like that, but they certainly were smarter than we were. They certainly weren't numb. They wouldn't give you a stupid answer that was just repeating what they heard. They would think about it first. They would say, I don't know. When's the last time you heard a student say, that's a good question, I don't know? Teachers either, if you ask them a question, they either get angry or they cry or they don't admit they don't know, or they give you an answer that absolutely has nothing to do with the question you asked in the first place. Now, I'm not anti-teacher, don't get me wrong, but I've had these conversations too often. Unfortunately, now that I'm semi-retired, I take my dogs to the dog park, about 2 miles from here, really, really nice dog park. And I go there late in the afternoon, and of course, people who have regular jobs usually till 5, they don't get home till 6 and not there. So there's usually more women than men there. And the women that are there, a good portion of them are teachers, and I have to be careful of what question I ask them. It's kind of silly. It's this, you can't have a conversation with a teacher. And I challenge anybody who's listening to this podcast to try to do so. Listen to, try to have a critical thinking conversation with a teacher. It's very difficult. Now, their intentions are good. They're wonderful people. I've never met a teacher who was a bad person, or didn't mean well. So don't get me wrong. I'm not anti-teacher. I'm anti-system. The kids were brought up in the system, and they got locked back into the system by teaching the system. And I think that's all wrong. And as a result, we have a tremendous rate of basic ignorance of children leaving high school. They don't have skills. They don't learn anything. They get out of high school and they have to go to college. And now college debt is well over $1.4 trillion that these kids owe school. They're never going to get out of it. I know I have a company with kids, young men in their 40s that still, they went back to school, figure, well, if they get a college education even later in life, they would be able to get a better job. Yeah, they went to college and they got a degree in sociology. They came out, they couldn't find a job any better than they had before, and they got a degree in sociology which qualifies them to do nothing. But now they have $54,000 in debt, or whatever the case may be. The last fellow that worked for me had $51,000 in debt, plus credit card debt and everything else. I mean, if I was in his shape, I would, I don't know what I would do, but I would have a difficult time living with myself. Well, why don't we teach that stuff in school? Why don't we ask the kids, what do you want to do? Why are we sitting here? We should abolish the entire school system. If we want to make America great again, we shouldn't embolden the Department of Education. We should dissolve it, get rid of it altogether. First of all, we'll save billions of dollars in Washington, giving money to people who do nothing but orchestrate rules and regulations that do more harm than good. The states can do whatever they want. The Department of Education, that very department, violates the principles of state sovereignty. If one state wants to have no public schools, that's their right. And I don't think it'll hurt children. I think it'll make them better. You think kids would be worse off if they didn't sit in the classroom, but they learned a trade? Or they learned how to use computers to program? If they did that on their own, or they just went to a specialized program just for that, and forget about all this high school garbage where they teach history, which is fiction. Most of the history they teach is fiction anyway. It's an indoctrination program. So kids come out well indoctrinated, support the government in everything that the government does, which is, is garbage, all right? And they can't find a job, which means they got to get a government loan to go to school. And by the way, when I went to college, I went to Pace College in New York City, very good college. The 4 years cost $4,000, and that was a lot of money then. It would be $4,000 for 4 years. It was $1,000 a year, and that was a high-end school. I mean, I had a job before I even graduated, because Pace College graduates, got jobs in downtown Manhattan. I was a sales promotion advertising coordinator for all the AMC stores, all the stores that are private brand merchandise for all the Bloomingdale's, all the big stores, right out of college. Today that would never happen, and it was $4,000. You know, it was all paid for by the time I left. I got summer jobs and stuff like that, paid for my own college. Today, that same college education would be $75,000. They'd be in debt for the rest of their lives. And the jobs don't exist as much as they used to. So much stuff has gone overseas. So where are we with this? Well, we have teachers going on strike. It's not right. But they shouldn't be teachers in the first place. If they wanted to really be a teacher, start your own school or start a private school. We should really be hitting the streets to get rid of the Department of Education altogether. The government should have no rights to interfere with the family and teaching of our own children. But no one's been saying that. They're saying, well, maybe if we modify this program, we have that program, we put more money here. All you do is muddy up the water and you make things worse. We can save the country billions of dollars. Of course, also closing all the military bases around the world, that wouldn't hurt at all. You know, keep all at home and let everyone fight their own battles, bring everyone home, you know, and put everyone back to work. But not with government jobs. You know, we only have a couple of minutes. I was over my daughter-in-law's house the other day, and I looked around the room, and we're all sitting around a table. It was my birthday. Thank you very much. And what was really interesting is everyone around that table, in one way, shape, or form, had a job or linked to the government. Now, I included myself as a half person because I still work, but I collect Social Security. So I considered myself a half government person. You know, my son works for a department where they try to rehabilitate children that are really in trouble. My daughter works for the state, the city or the state for Department of Welfare or something like that. And anyway, went around the table, and out of the 6 people on the table, my wife is an audiologist, but she collects Social Security, so we counted her as a half person. But basically 6.5 people out of 5.5 people out of 6, basically, if you want to cut people in half if they were working for the government and also had got a government check and had their own business. Work for the government. This country can't exist the way it is now. We need to be totally free enterprise. And the school system needs to be totally free enterprise. But you didn't hear one teacher say that. Not one teacher. What did they say? Oh, no, we need more money. And what does that do for them? And I know I've heard all the stories about the teachers buying supplies because the school didn't have supplies. Listen, I applaud them for it. I think it's wonderful they do that. And I know they care. But they don't realize they're working for the wrong person. They should be working for themselves to benefit the students, not working for the government to get a check. Now you tell it to teachers, they get awfully mad, they get awfully angry. But you force them to think. And I want people to start thinking about our problems. What is the root cause for our problems? And in most cases, the root cause of our government is government regulation, government interference, exactly what the founding fathers said, beware of. Don't get involved in that. States are sovereign. You do what you want. It's your business. It's not our business. Our business is to ensure that we don't violate your rights to be free. And with that, I will say this is the end of our first broadcast. I hope everything works out. I hope it came on right. I wired everything up properly, and I hope everything gets out there. I didn't ask people to call into our toll-free number today. I should have, and we didn't get any calls, did we? No, we didn't get any calls today. But during our future broadcasts, we're going to have guests, and we encourage people to listen in and to call in. And now, let's see, I guess we're going to end the show. If I press the right buttons, we'll go off the air. And please, I will post on Blog Talk Radio and on YouTube and all these other places. And go to libertytalkradio.com, where we will indicate when our next broadcast is. Okay, for that, bye-bye now.